wars are often the scene for extraordinary occurrences, which may range from terrifying to miraculous. Nothing was different during World War I. In August of 1941, there were allegations that British forces were fighting with angels in Mons, which was located in France. The Hell Hound of Mons was a big, violent gray dog that would kill any soldier who went out into no man's land, in between the trenches of the opposing troops. Mons was also the location of the Hell Hound of Mons. Another supernatural and miraculous occurrence took place between the trench lines that separated the city of Ypres in Belgium from the cities of Arras and Bailleul in France. This incident included a ghostly cavalry unit. The usage of horse cavalry was still prevalent during this time period, despite the fact that armored cavalry tanks were rapidly replacing them. An individual named Captain Whitewick served as the British intelligence officer for that particular area. His headquarters were located in the town of Bethune. Casualties were high, and supplies were in short supply. In March of 1918, the nation of Portugal declared its participation in the Great War on the side of the Allies. There, it made its landing in France. While everything was going on, Germany was sending out an increasing number of soldiers and weaponry, which was a relentless assault on the Allies. Whitewick was notified that some Portuguese troops would be going through his region to replace the British soldiers who were stationed there and take over the defense of that portion of the front lines by the time March came to a close. Because the adversary was being so aggressive in their assaults, there was a great deal of concern that the sector would be lost by the month of June. The German artillery continued to bombard the Portuguese forces until a breach was created in the front lines. This opened the door for the enemy soldiers to go over the wall and force the Allied troops to retreat. The Portuguese troops had abandoned their guns and equipment as they retreated in the direction of Bethune. It was stated that the Angels of Mons were called upon on account of the unified prayers of the people of the United Kingdom back in their homeland. During the fierce fighting that was taking place close to Bethune, a call was made for the people of England to come together once again and pray for their courageous soldiers. The call to prayer was heard on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. After then, it seemed as if the prayers had been answered. The German soldiers who were aiming their concentrated artillery against the Bethune lines were able to raise it one day and reroute it outside of the town. It was a large open area with a few homes and a few trees, according to the accounts. There was really nothing else there. Not only did the Germans begin to aim their artillery barrages, but they also began to focus their machine gun fire on this site for some unknown purpose. As Captain Whitewick was curious about the activities of the adversary, he decided to go and investigate. The Germans were pounding the bare dirt, and Whitewick and his soldiers stood there in awe as they did so. The impact of artillery rounds resulted in the formation of craters, while the impact of machine gun rounds on the ground displayed the formation of puffs of dirt. They were at a loss to understand what was going on. Had the German commander lost his mind? How did things come to be? Moving stealthily down the canal, the captain conducted an investigation to determine what would have prompted the Germans to move their assaults to an area that seemed to be devoid of occupation. At the moment when he was moving through the wreckage of the town, there was complete silence. The only sound that could be heard was that of a lark singing as it flew into the sky. While saying that the enemy was withdrawing, a sergeant and a few of the British men were waving their caps at Captain Whitewick. Other British forces were also there. From a higher vantage point, he was able to see a line of German troops who had stopped, and despite the fact that they were well-trained soldiers, they had thrown down their guns and bags out of panic before fleeing in the other way. The whole time, Captain Whitewick did not see anything that may provide an explanation for what was taking on. In the end, the sergeant was successful in capturing 2 German troops, both of whom were officers. It was said by the detainees that the two individuals were conducting reconnaissance in the vicinity of Bethune in the event that any British reinforcements were arriving. The two individuals saw a horse cavalry brigade emerging from the midst of the clearing. Every individual who was a part of this brigade wore a white uniform and was mounted on a brilliant white horse. However, the German lieutenant had never heard of any of the British cavalry wearing white uniforms. He thought that their British colonial soldiers were wearing white uniforms. In spite of the mayhem caused by the crashing shells that were falling all around them, this peculiar group of horsemen continued to proceed ahead at a slow and persistent pace. According to the detainees, it was more likely that they were on parade than they were really engaged in combat. There was not a single horse or rider that was killed when the machine guns were cranked up and fired at the oncoming horse forces. Rather, they continued to come regardless. A guy whose hair shined like spun gold, almost like an aura or halo, was in charge of this almost invulnerable battalion that was dressed in white. His horse was enormous, and it carried him onward with a confident stride. With one hand, he carried a sword, and with the other, he grasped the reins of his horse. They were characterized by the Germans as being remorseless as fate, as the incoming tide, to explain their progression. The soldiers were overcome with the terror at that same instant, and they ran away, having been vanquished by this spectral brigade of horsemen. During the time when Captain Whitewick had the opportunity to interview other captives from that fight, each man related the same account of the odd white cavalry marching from the smoke of the battle as if they were some dreadful retribution from beyond. But during the whole ordeal, not a single British soldier was able to see their spectral protectors.